Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you might be. I am personally in Dubai, so it's 8 p.m. It's such a privilege to be spending my Friday evening and weekend with you all to tell you a bit more about Yale's admissions process and to be joined by Director of International Admissions and a few of our current Arab students at Yale. I really hope you are all keeping well and are safe along with your loved ones, especially during those particularly trying times. And I'm very, very happy to welcome you to the first part of our three-part series on Arabs applying to Yale. In terms of the main aim of the series, that will stretch over the next 2 weeks. So next Friday will be the second part, and then in a fortnight, we'll have the final part. We are trying to increase the number. I just enabled the live transcription if anyone needs that. So the main aim of this series is to increase the number of applicants to Yale from the Arab world. As you might all know, there is an incredible level of talent out there, and we want to maximize on those opportunities and try and attract as many students as possible to such a great institution. We'd want over the next hour to break some of the common misconceptions in the application process and on financial aid. And we want to offer a bit of a high level breakdown or overview of the application process. And that will be the aim over the next 2 weeks. It gives me a lot of pleasure to be moderating this session over the next hour. By means of introduction, my name is Shady. I am from Yemen. I'm a member of the Yale Arab Alumni Association. I also happen to be a member of the board of directors for Yale's Alumni Fund. I was class of 2020, so I graduated last year. I double majored in economics and Near Eastern studies. And during my time at Yale, it was an honor to serve as president of the Arab Student Association for 2 years. I also founded the Middle East and North Africa Student Association on campus to try and create a fifth cultural house representing our part of the world, and efforts on that are still going. As part of my time at Yale, I was also president of my college council and I led the table tennis club. So all of that is to say that later on during the Q&A segment, feel free to ask me absolutely anything about my own personal experiences for some of the best 4 years I've spent logistically now, and for some housekeeping. As I mentioned, this event will last for approximately an hour. We will start with some welcome remarks from the current president of the Arab Student Association, Tanya, who's with us today. We'll then, of course, give the floor to Yale's Director of International Admissions, Mr. Keith Light. We're super lucky to have with us today. He'll be speaking a bit more about admissions for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then we also are privileged to have a few of our current undergraduate students with us who will be sharing some of their experiences. So we'll have Yazan, who's a first year, sharing his thoughts. Then we'll have Faisal, who's a sophomore, and then Amr, who is a junior. We'll then show a very quick promo video of an event created by the ASA on campus to just give you a bit of a taste on what the ASA does at Yale. And then we'll go to the Q&A segment, where I'll try as much as possible to make sure that we have around 20 minutes where you should feel comfortable to ask any questions you have on mind. On that front, I'll ask that if you have a question, feel free to put it on the chat. So we'll actively monitor that for that last segment, or you could use the raise hand function on Zoom. We'll then call upon you. You could unmute and you could ask your question, specifying who it is towards. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Tanya.
Thank you so much, Shady. Hi, everyone. As Shady said, my name is Tanya Jumra. I'm Lebanese. I'm a junior at Yale studying electrical engineering and economics, and I am the president of the Yale Arab Students Association. I'd like to extend the warmest welcome to all of you to this first program today of the three-part series that the Arab Students Association and the Arab Alumni Association are co-hosting, Arabs Applying to Yale. Before we begin, I'd like to talk briefly about the ASA and what we do. The Yale Arab Students Association is a cultural group on campus dedicated to creating a sense of community for Arabs and Arab Americans on campus and in New Haven, while bridging the cultural gap between the Arab world and the United States. In sharing our love for Arab culture, we host all kinds of events, from addressing pressing social and political issues concerning Arabs and the region to coming together to eat good food and just listen to good music. More than anything, the ASA gives all of us Arab students on campus a home that seems so very far from home. Again, I'd like to welcome all of you and thank you again for coming today. And I hope it's an informative session that encourages you all to apply.
Thank you so much, dear Tanya, for the introduction. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Keith Light, the Director of International Admissions at Yale University. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, it's a great treat for me to be here, Shady, and I thank the group for inviting me. One of my favorite activities as an admissions officer is actually talking with students and families and trying to answer questions. And an important part of any good admissions officer's job is learning about the individuals and the cultures and the backgrounds, all of the things that are pertinent to making selections that in a place like Yale, we have the great luxury, in fact, the obligation to try to find students who will thrive in an atmosphere like ours, where we prize interaction, ideas, respectful discussions, arguments, audacity. And there's one of the reasons I've been doing this for a long time, almost 100 years. I was here when Yale was founded. And that the idea is that because we can bring together a great many resources. The libraries behind Shady, you can see, is the flagship library, but there are 1,200 laboratories and there are observatories and playing fields and art studios and museums, and then you bring together some of the world's great scholars on nearly any subject you can imagine. But here's the thing, and I'll bet you my undergraduates and alumni colleagues on the call and others that you may meet through this great series will probably be able to articulate to any of you listening in their own words why the biggest reason to even think about places like Yale or Harvard or Stanford or some of the well-known American universities will be the students that you spend the time with, not because many will be lifelong friends, but because it's that that melting pot, that crucible of interaction between students and faculty as their guides with all of the resources that is the real magic in the learning process here. Now, and I try to use my own words as much as I can, but having been an admissions officer for a long time and an advisor to students, I think that's the magic that works. It's not just the number of Nobel Prize winners or the number of books in the libraries or how pretty the buildings is. It's that ongoing interaction, and that's the absolute truth. So as you're looking for schools, you might ask, well, what is the opportunity for students to talk and to meet and to meet with faculty, not just to meet them, but to have conversations. So that's a bit of my preamble. I'm going to try to, as advertised, say a few things about admissions to begin with. And for truth, by the way, in advertising and disclosure, I'm not really 80 years old, not quite. And I love Yale. I've been here for more than a decade, but I'm going to mention a little bit of my background, not for credibility, except in one area, maybe. But I was an undergraduate at the Yale of California, Stanford University. And I did some graduate work at, Shady, help me, what's the name of the school in Cambridge, Massachusetts? It's down the road from the school with the letters, the three letters. Well, anyway, so I did some graduate work in Boston, and I also have been an admissions officer at Stanford and Princeton and Brown. Harvard is the place in Cambridge. And then I finally had enough experience to work at Yale. The only reason I mentioned that is because my colleagues from those places that have the luxury of choosing students who will add to this magnificent experiment would agree, even though these different places have different personalities and in some cases different characteristics. The main reason, as I say, to think about these places is not fame and not rankings. It's because you will meet people like the ones you will meet today. They will talk to you about their experiences and so on. And then that ties right into the whole admissions question. Again, I think that's why my job is so interesting. If it was just about, tabulating marks earned in school and deciding whether or not your essay was entertaining, well, my iPhone could probably make those decisions. My iPhone made me breakfast this morning, but it could not do the kind of work we do. And so one thing to keep in mind is that our very mysterious admissions process in the US, and some of you may be in America or North America and are very familiar with both the general system and the schools, but some of you may be from Yemen or Lebanon or Saudi Arabia or Algeria, many places. And so some of the mysteries are worth trying to address it, and I'll do this here. Oh, and by the way, I said before that our job as admissions officers is to discover those students who will, as I say, engage in this learning process. It doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert. Some of the wisest students and people I've learned from have been soft-spoken. In fact, their thoughtfulness is what carries the day in the classroom, in the residence halls, in informal conversations, in cultural events, and so on. And we happen to prize that at Yale and places like it. And so the application is meant to be an introduction to the different kinds of students that we may imagine thriving on the Yale campus, not only during their undergraduate years, but being a participating beacon in world activities, whether it's being an important leader in some ways, or an important leader as a teacher in a classroom or a guide. So it's all very idealistic, but that's why it's so interesting and such a big responsibility to do the admissions process. The last thing I'll mention as a preamble is that I mentioned that it's important for us to know something about as much as we can. The application process is imperfect, but it's an obligation of ours that I take seriously, my international team takes seriously, the Dean of Admissions does as well. In fact, the Dean is always the chairperson of our international admissions committees. He finds it so interesting, but it's part of that obligation. And what we need to do is be able to convey through our readings of students to infuse our discussions, whether we're making written comments or having conversations about the experiences the students we're reading about may have. And it doesn't make any of us more expert than anyone else, but it's a diverse group who reads. But I also go to parts of the world where there are many Arab students. And that's deliberate. I've been to Lebanon and the Saudi Peninsula and Pakistan and Egypt and a number of places where specifically to indicate that we care about representation, not just geographically, but culturally and otherwise. And by the way, I think we're smart enough to realize that representing a culture is not a unilateral kind of thing. There are Arab students with a huge variety of talents and convictions and personalities, and that's just what makes the whole university experience so exciting. So I've laid that table not just to be Addie, I see in your the chat, you said Pakistan. I've been to Pakistan 3 times, and it's been one of my favorite places to visit. I can tell you stories about all my adventures in places throughout the Middle East. By the way, I also, the rest of Africa, Europe, all the United World Colleges are part of my territory. So I have one of the best jobs, not only at Yale, but around the world. But that preamble was not just a commercial for higher education or Yale or just empty thoughts about admissions. It really is what any student applying to Yale should have in mind. And you don't have to take all of my words for it, but you can see that it is not a mechanical process, I hope, because learning about students' aspirations, their experiences, their points of view, and by the way, we're not looking for particular points of view. We're looking for the interest in having a point of view and an ability to express oneself through this imperfect vehicle that college applications are. But what I want you to know is that at Yale and at Harvard and at Stanford, we read the applications. I mean, we read them cover to cover. I read 2 applications this morning, and I start with mainly the student story. We note sort of the name and region to begin with, but we plunge right in by reading the thoughts of the students who are applying. Now, I understand you're going to have a session on writing essays, but one thing I want you to know is that it's an essential part of the whole process. It's where you introduce yourself to us. And we read the essays and short answers and list of interests and accomplishments and so on. As a whole, we're literally meeting you through the application. I'll say more about the application pieces in a minute. But we don't stop there. It's the reason that American universities tend to ask for more recommendations and things, and specifically places like Yale. Many American universities, it's one recommendation, and if any, that they really stress the grades and maybe test scores and things like that. That's not better. It's not worse. It's just different. But our mission is different. But in any case, we go on to read what your teachers say about you. Why they like having Shafiq in the classroom. Why. What this student brings to discussions, how he approaches homework, how he tries to think and uses imagination and so on. So you can see that the recommendations are not just endorsements, but as I'm reading an application, I'm imagining the student who told herself about me and matching that with what the teachers and the counselors say about the student. And the best thing I can say when I'm writing up a comment about an application is the teachers also describe the student I met in the application. So, so one myth is that the objective in an application is to write award-winning essays or try to entertain admissions officers by having fascinating stories about walking across the desert, or you being chased by a bear, or students feeling that because it's Yale, an Ivy League school, you need to use very long, complicated words. I'll tell you right now, I hate having to look up words while I'm reading an application. The idea, again, is to take the questions that are posed in an application. Essay prompts, they're often called. Tell us about an event that's affected you, a challenge. They're really just starter points to get you to write about some things that have influenced you, things that you think about. You may even embed reasons that you're thinking about university in general, the places you're applying in particular, but you shouldn't feel any pressure to try and impress us. Some of the most effective applications and application essays I've written over the past 35 years, and that the 35 years part is true. The topics have been about ordinary subjects. It's as if I'm overhearing friends talking to friends, or a student talking with a mentor or favorite teacher. The objective is to show you not to try to win an essay contest. And that theme applies to how you list the activities and interests you have. It's a typically American thing where everybody's doing 18,000 extracurricular activities. We don't expect that to be the habit in many cultures and schools around the world. Some schools that I've visited in some of the places I mentioned, anything extracurricular, it might be playing world football on a break, or it might be being involved in informal community service, or participating in cultural and religious activities. The reason we ask for activities is just a hint to us that a student won't come to Yale and just spend all day in one of the, how many do we have? 25 libraries. The libraries are important, but conversing, being involved, is very much part of the experience. And by the way, there are students who apply to Yale who do many, many activities, and some who do a relatively small number. We don't have an image in mind about what should be there in that regard. I honestly could talk for about 3 days just about Yale or about admissions, but I know that there are others who will have a word, and as Shady promised, there'll be time for a question, and we'll do as many as we can today, but there are other ways to be in touch with us. The last thing I want to say, though, is about the academic piece of all of this. I've talked about qualitative impressions that we make and how we do that, but that ties very much into the academic side. Like I say, the essays and your interests, what your teachers say about you, are directly related to what you'll be like as a young scholar at Yale. And one of the reasons I've loved being here, and you don't have to take my word for it, they don't pay me enough to lie to you, and that is that there is a value placed even by the faculty on being among students who want to engage. Our faculty are not the ones who want you to sit obediently in the classroom and nod all the time. That's boring for them. Otherwise, they do everything on Zoom. So like I said before, you don't have to be an extrovert, but we're interested in you engaging, having late night conversations, maybe over ice cream or long walks during the warm months here. But that's what we hope to find. Academically, it's not just high grades, it's that curiosity. Now, by the way, very good marks are a suggestion that you like school, that you've had a preparation, that in the case where the marks are based on an evaluation from teachers, that it does represent something. But one of the things that we have the luxury to do, and I think it makes for better choices, is that once students have the kind of marks where, here's an example for you. If I walked into any of your high schools and said, point out, if I talked to a student and said, point out 10 or 20 students you think love learning, the teachers love having it in the classroom, who are the good students here in your school? I'll bet you that the students that they would point out would be the kind of students we'd be interested in, even if they didn't have all A stars in A levels, even if they didn't have, in the American terms, all A's or a 4.0. It helps at places like Yale if you have mostly A's or mostly 6s and 7s in the IB program. Or if you're in the French system in Beirut, that you've got 12s and 13s and 14s. We know the different systems, but we don't look at the grades mechanically. After we realize you've got the strengths, then it's, what do the essays tell us about this student? What is this level of students' curiosity? What do the teachers say? It's art, not science, but I want to assure you that despite all of the rumors about admissions to fancy places like Yale, you don't have to have perfect marks. You don't have to have perfect SATs. And many of you may know that for the current season and last season, SATs were optional because the plague made it very difficult for students to even sit for the exams, let alone, in their minds be ready for this. And before I forget to say, nobody tends to do better on the test by spending money or drilling for hours and hours. It's good to be familiar. If by tests being optional, that doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't submit results. We just use them hand in hand with your marks. We're more interested in how you do in the classroom or in your national systems every day rather than a single test. But they are a little bit of extra information, but the SATs and ACTs are not the equivalent of national exams or A-level exams or German Abitur or French Bac. It's a different kind of system. Well, but I won't say anything more about that now unless you ask. But the point is that we are very much looking for very good students. But I want you to know that when we admissions officers babble about holistic admissions and all of that, the irony is that at some of the most selective schools in America, Yale and Harvard and Princeton and MIT and Dartmouth and Chicago and Stanford and so, we actually are not looking for absolute perfection. We're looking for energy, thoughtfulness, and so on. And there's proof in the pudding. I often tell the story, and since Pakistan came up a few years ago when I was visiting, there was a lot of buzz in the press about a student who had taken more than 20 A-level exams and had gotten A's and A stars on all of the exams. No doubt about the capability of the student, but we chose other students from Pakistan and around the world and not this student, not because we thought that the student couldn't do it, but it illustrates the fact that we're looking for qualities, not just naked achievement. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to my excellent hosts. And if I forget to say later, this won't be the only opportunity any of you, if you're interested in Yale or college admissions, to ask what's on your mind. But thanks for letting me say a few words today.
Thank you so much, Keith, for such a lovely overview. I'm sure it was super informative for all of our applicants, and I'm also sure many will have questions later on. Without further ado, I will give the floor now to Yazan, who is from Palestine and is a first-year student. So he's only been on campus maybe for the past month and a half. So Yazan, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Shady. Hey, everyone, and thank you for choosing to session tonight. I'm Yazan. As Shady said, I'm from Palestine. First year here, and my experience so far has been really awesome. It's only been a month or so since I've been to Yale, and I'm really grateful for everything in the experience. One, we're very lucky to be in person this year, which is amazing considering that we spent the last year online. But second, I found that Yale is really an awesome place, not because, well, the things that you hear about it being a good university, but also because people here they're very collaborative. And before coming to Yale, I was very intimidated. It's very intimidating to apply because you think that everyone here is supposed to be some kind of genius. You think everyone here is unbelievably talented in a way that you can never attain. And coming here, I realized that's not the case. Everyone here is talented and they're really smart and creative, but not everyone is insanely. People here are normal. They're just like me and you. They're regular people. And what I would suggest is definitely do not feel intimidated by the name Yale or think that there's a certain group of people that apply to Yale or that there's only a certain group of people that get accepted to Yale, because I came here and so far there's no way of telling a Yale student from a non-Yale student. I mean, yes, they're talented and they're awesome people, but there is no formula for a Yale student. Everyone is different in their own way, and it's really awesome because Yale is it's a collaborative place. So far, everyone's been very, very helpful. Everyone you talk to is willing to lend a hand, and they're very genuine. When they say they'd like to help, they really mean it. And so I want to emphasize on the point that Mr. Light talked about, which is you don't have to have worked at the UN for I don't know how many years. You don't have to have made your own organization. You can be you. You should be you. As long as you're driven, as long as you're motivated, you want to learn. You want to work with other people. That drive, that energy. I think that's the most important thing that you need to remember when you're applying or choosing to come to a place like Yale. So definitely do not feel scared to apply, and definitely do not feel overwhelmed by all the things that Yale has to offer, because at first it was very overwhelming, but with time I realized that there's always someone that you can ask. There's always someone who's willing to help, because at the end of the day, they're all people, they're regular people. And yeah, and as for my experience, it's been really great. This past month just flew by. It's really awesome. And before classes were in session, I actually did OIS, which is Orientation for International Students. I met a lot of other internationals and some Arabs, and it's a really awesome community. It's a great place that I think all of you would love to be a part of. And all the people that I met, they're talented and they're really awesome. But I'm pretty sure that some of you are even more talented, and so don't feel any fear applying or coming to you. And yeah. And the Arab Student Association is also a very cool place where you can meet other Arabs, and you can see how all of us, I think, are involved in the Arab Student Association. It's a very nice place because also, yeah, there are many facets in which you can display your talents or engage in your cultural or ideological interests. Uh, there's always, whenever you go, you have a certain friend group, maybe for this class or this cultural group or this identity or an ideological thing or maybe some difference that you want to bridge between you and some other people. And I think that that's something Yale is really, really good at, which is bringing people together. And in that aspect, it's again, it's been really great. Um, yeah,
Thank,
I think.
thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Azam. I don't think I could have said that any better. It's been very beautiful hearing you and hearing Harkness in the background. It really, really makes me miss campus. But thank you so much, Yazan, for sharing your experiences and being with us today. I'll now like to give the floor to Faisal, who is a sophomore from Saudi Arabia. Faisal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shady. So my name is Faisal. I'm from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I'm a sophomore and I'm majoring in political science and modern Middle East studies. And I completely agree with everything that Yazan said. I actually spent my first year remotely in Saudi because I had visa issues. And so when I was thinking about starting this year, I was very nervous. Am I going to be able to make friends? Am I going to be able to figure out everything about the university and where classes are and finding organizations and people who I'll want to be join different organizations with them. And so that was a really big concern for me. What I found in this first month was that there was no reason for me to be fearful. People were so incredibly welcoming and engaging and excited to meet me and other people, whether that be professors and students, faculty and staff. People were so incredibly welcoming. And I was really quickly able to, despite having spent a year remotely, make a lot of friends and join different groups and organizations. So as Yazan said, Yale is an incredibly welcoming place. And while there is no unifying factor among all students, there's no unifying interest, unifying academic or extracurricular interests. I would say probably the one unifying factor is that everybody is incredibly nice, incredibly welcoming to people from all backgrounds, all cultures. And I really appreciated that. Just to give you an example, I'm taking a course this semester called Middle East Politics. And in that course, there are people from the Gulf, there are people from Iran, people from Israel, people from Lebanon, from Egypt, from all over the world. And despite our cultural differences, our different backgrounds, different experiences, we were able to all come together and have very productive and engaged discussions about very contentious topics like the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, like different ideological movements in the region. I think that's very emblematic of Yale overall. It's a place where you have people who, from backgrounds where they typically will not be able to interact, but they come here and they're able to discuss with each other and to engage in a very productive way together. And I really value that, and I found that to be very important for me. When I was thinking of where I wanted to go to university, I always had this idea that I might want to go to the US. But when I started to think about it more substantively, I realized that the reason I wanted to go to the US was because I wanted a liberal arts education. I wanted the opportunity to try to explore fields that would be completely unrelated to my major. So in my short time, I've been able to take classes in economics and history and philosophy and biology. And these have all definitely supplemented the political science classes and the modern Middle East studies classes that I've taken. Another thing I really love about Yale is that it's a combination of a small liberal arts college within a larger research university. So I've taken classes where there are hundreds of people, I've taken classes with 7 other people. But in both of those situations, the professors were incredibly engaged, incredibly welcoming, willing to meet with you individually and to discuss potential projects that you want to do with them independently. And I really found that amazing that even in a class with over 200 students, the professor is still willing to hold office hours and meet with you and discuss the content in class, as well as any further research you would want to do with them. And in terms of different organizations on campus, there's an organization for every single interest you can imagine. But even if there isn't one, you can create one. If you end up coming here and you find that you have a particular specific interest and there's no organization that represents that, you can always found one and you can always start one and you'll have tremendous support from the university. So overall, I've really loved my experience here. I love my experience at Yale. It lived up to all of my expectations and so much more. I would really encourage you all to apply. And because when I was applying, I was incredibly intimidated to apply. I thought that there was no way that I'd be able to get in, and it was completely out of my league. But I would say that those thoughts shouldn't inhibit you from applying and applying yourself and putting yourself out there, because you really don't know what could happen. So with that, I'll just pass it back to Shady and encourage you all to consider applying to Yale.
Very, very well said, Faisal. I don't think Zola could have said it better. Thanks for sharing your experiences. And we will have with us now Amr, who is a junior from Syria, but also lived in Jordan. Amr, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amr. I'm a junior right now here at Yale. I am majoring in molecular biophysics and biochemistry. And yeah, so I'll be talking like a bit about like my background and how Yale was able to support me. And honestly, like the opportunities here at Yale are like unmatched. And honestly, I would have never thought like I'll be able to get where I am today without Yale. And the reason for that is that, first of all, Yale offers a lot of support to students, like in terms of financial aid. Like, for example, I like my family doesn't make a lot of income. So having the financial aid program, especially at Yale, and especially for international students, has helped me a lot. And also moving like from Syria to Jordan, I was like a first generation student. I like none of my family members went to college, and trying to navigate that process was super difficult at first. But once you get here to Yale, you realize that a lot of people are in the same position. And that's what I like about Yale, is that they offer a lot of opportunities for students that had like a lot of challenges on the way. And also the like the admission series that we're doing right now is supposed to help everyone. And also I remember like Mr. Lai also came to my school and like sort of guided me through the process. And like I was lucky enough to meet him too at my time. And what I like about Yale specifically too is the fact that there's a lot of opportunities. And moving from Syria to Jordan, it was such a big jump. And I started working with refugees around that time, and refugee advocacy in Jordan. And coming here to Yale, I wanted to continue that. And right now, this is what I do for most of the time, actually. I'm like the external president of RISE, which is a student organization here at Yale, tailored specifically for that purpose, for tutoring refugees. And I interact with a lot of refugees. So I just feel like Yale was able to offer me a lot of opportunities that really connect with my own narrative and what I'm personally interested in. And I just felt like that part of the story is very important, because not only you'll be able to meet a lot of intellectually driven people, but you also get to have a lot of valuable experiences that will stick with you forever. And I think this is definitely the case. And I've had like one of the most like defining experiences here at Yale. And without that, I feel like my personality would have not been like as developed, like compared if I stayed back in Jordan, for example. And also just like in terms of education, like you get to meet your professors and everyone is very supportive. At first, like when I was coming here to Yale, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a biomedical engineer. I thought I wanted to do political science, and I was just exploring every single major. But like after talking to professors and getting to take like an array of different classes, I was able to realize, oh, like this is what I want. Like, and I discovered that I want to become a scientist, and I was able to talk to some professors, and that's the great part about Yale, is that professors are very accessible. Like I know my friends like in some other universities, they don't even get to meet their professors in person. Like, so for that reason, it's like it's really good to be able to interact with professors, and also just to explore classes. I also definitely wanted a liberal arts education, just to explore different like classes in humanities, social sciences. And I think all of that have helped me like become more mature and get to study like things that I've never like realized I would be interested in. I actually like took a class last year about like Greek mythology, and that was amazing, honestly. So like there's a lot of chances to explore, and I think what may make Yale like a good place to be in is the opportunities that you'll find. Like I do research, for example, at the School of Medicine, and there's a lot of funding. Yeah, and just the professors around you, and everyone is so collaborative, and everyone wants you to succeed. I feel like this is the nice part about Yale is that everyone is just so collaborative, and like there's no toxic competition around. Everyone wants you to strive, and yeah, and honestly, yeah, I've made like a lot of like good friends here that I see myself talking to after college, and yeah, you should apply to Yale. It's such a great place.
Thank you so much, Amr, for sharing your experiences. And as someone who graduated, I could only say that the experience gets better. Some of my best experiences were during my senior year, albeit it was cut a bit short because of the pandemic, but only gets better. I would like to just share a video from the ASA to give you a bit of a taster of the stuff that happens on campus, and then we'll launch straight away into Q&A. I know we're running a bit behind on time, so maybe we'll finish 5 minutes or 10 minutes later. So let me just play this video, and then we could go into Q&A.
أهلا وسهلا بكم جميعا نورتونا بحضوركم. As the first young undergraduate at Yale, I feel privileged to launch Yale's first Arab conference, Amalna, Paving the Road Ahead.
I feel so proud of all of you, of the hard work you've put in to make this a perfect conference.
I hope this will be beginning of something to build on.
Just meeting young people who are thinking about these issues is really invigorating for me, so I couldn't have asked for a better experience.
I love the theme of the conference, Amalna. I think it's important more than ever in the United States to explain that the Middle East region and the Arab region more broadly is not just a region of conflict, but it's a region of hope, it's a region of success, and it's a region where people are living and trying to make their lives better.
I absolutely feel that the topics that we're discussing are incredibly important today in the world, in the Middle East, and it comes from the student body and professors and others has been incredibly rewarding. And I've even learned a lot, and I'm in the region. So that's a testament to the people that you brought and how much work you put into this.
I guess my only message would be so often what you're doing is inspiring us, and that would probably be my message more than anything else.
على قدر أهل العزم تأتي العزائم وتأتي على قدر الكرام المكارم.
If you go back to your countries to build, Allah ma'akum, and don't forget that you do have many friends in the United States.
I think it was a wonderful experience, and I hope you guys can keep it up and keep organizing these conferences.
Terrifically impressed by the effort that has been made to really get this going. No doubt it has taken an enormous effort, and it's quite an honor for me to be a part of this.
So yeah, that's just to give you a very quick snippet of some of the things the Arab Students Association does on campus. And hopefully, inshallah, if you're part of Yale, you'll be able to participate in similar activities. And some of my best experiences were with the Arab Students Association. I realize that we are a bit behind on time, so without further ado, we'll just jump into the Q&A section. I've been noting some of your questions as we've been going through, but if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to put them on the chat, or you can use the raise hand function on Zoom, and we will be able to give you the floor. But to just get us started, I think we had a question from Jad. I think that's to you, Keith, asking if the application evaluation process is different in any way for international students, or is it standardized across applications in general?
First of all, that's a great video. Maybe you'll let me take it on the road with me when I get back to visit all these great places. The process is exactly the same intentionally. It's just as I hopefully described before. We apply a different lens to fit, so that we understand. But there's not a stack of international applications, and there's not a stack of domestic applications. And I think it's a process that works very well. A similar question might be: are there quotas, or are there anything like that would either help or limit students who are applying? And I think it might have been Yazan who said it, don't be afraid to apply, and Faisal as well, that nobody should underestimate that they have the qualities, the strengths, the promise that any other student might have. So I'll keep it brief and say that there aren't any limits. Every new application and every new year is a completely new mural to paint on. So there.
Thank you very much, Keith. I'll make sure you also get the link for the video. We have another great question from Mohammed, asking if Yale admissions office is familiar with how schools in the Middle East operate. I assume he means in terms of like different exams. If you didn't do GCSEs or A levels or the baccalaureate, is Yale familiar with those examinations?
We're very familiar, and there's a collected interest and experience on our staff. And in the cases where even within an area, one school approaches things differently, or different sizes, we do our homework. And so I can promise you that I meant what I said. It's in our interest to look for reasons to admit you. And that sometimes means doing extra homework. But to begin with, again, it's part of our responsibility. And it's fascinating to understand what's different about being a student in Morocco versus a student in Southern California, and we're pretty good at it.
Thank you, Keith. And I think there was a few questions about the financial aid process in terms of how does that work? If someone doesn't have the financial capability, of course, to afford Yale's tuition, and they're up for it, will they still be able to apply to Yale?
Yes, good point. And I remember made the pitch that Yale's very supportive, and again, so are our brother and sister institutions as well. It's in our interest. We're not just trying to be generous, although I agree with all the comments about the good warm feelings at Yale, and so it goes with the financial process as well. That it's a better institution if we make sure that students who apply and would like to be here can attend. So our financial aid program is very generous. It's based on need. It doesn't mean you need to be needy or poor. It just means that the difference between the high cost and the price tag is very high. It's expensive to keep all of these things going. But for individual students and their families, it might be too expensive even to afford the books that are needed. So Yale will make up the difference between the high cost and what's realistic for families to afford. It's a gift. It's not a loan. I'll just leave it at that the message is, don't apply to Yale because it's generous. Apply to Yale because of all of the things that my young friends have said. but don't assume that you wouldn't be able to afford to attend. The average financial aid package for all international students is well over $70,000, but if you need everything, that's what we'll provide. And by everything, I'm talking about not just tuition and living in the residential colleges, but books, supplies. We realize that you have to be able to get from Cairo or Islamabad or Beirut or Jordan or Israel. So I'll leave it at that. Don't rule out Yale because of the price. We can be generous the entire time you're here. By the way, no merit scholarships. You might be very good with a football, or maybe a very good tennis player or a musician, and so on. We take that into account, but it doesn't affect the financial part of things.
Thank you, Keith. And yeah, I'd like to stress how we're very, very fortunate that Yale is needs blind in its policy, which means that if you will get admitted to Yale, regardless of your financial situation, they will bring you to Yale wherever you are around the world. They will get you and you'll have such an incredible time. So I just wanted to stress that. There was an interesting question that—
Shady, one more thing on that, and I should have said it, but I take it for granted. It's the same policy regardless of your citizenship. I mean, I hope that was, but need blind, full need met. Go on.
Perfect. Yeah. And there was a question speaking about transitioning to Yale and the US in general. I'll leave that for Faisal or Amr if you want to weigh in on that.
I can take that question. I think that you definitely may experience some cultural differences depending on where you're from and the experience you may or may not have with the US, but I think that the cultural differences should not be an inhibitor to you applying or considering applying. I think that, like I believe someone mentioned, there's the orientation for international students where they talk about the US, they talk about US culture, and they talk about opening a bank account and like a bunch of other like logistical things that you may not be aware of, and getting a SIM card, and just US culture in general. So there are a lot of resources, and there are going to be plenty of people who end up coming here that are going to help you adjust to the US and to Yale. And also something I think is very important is that you will find people who come from a similar background as you. Like the Arab Student Association has been an incredible resource for students who have a similar background to me, but there are many other organizations for different religious groups and cultural groups. So I think that you may experience some differences, some cultural differences, but those things can be overcome, and there are going to be plenty of resources here to help you make that shift.
Thank you, Faisal. I'm just trying to pull a few of the questions that we have on the chat, and a few of them I could see are regarding the SAT or the ACT. Keith, would be able to shine some light on that front. Some people are asking, can you apply without the SAT? Would their application be compromised otherwise?
Yes, and I'll try to keep it brief, though I realize that some of these are deeper questions. First of all, the SAT and ACT are useful to us where we wouldn't have asked for them, but currently we're not expecting students to go to that trouble. And we don't use the SAT as a way to screen applicants. I meant what I said before, and that is that we're more interested in how you've been as a student all along, but the SATs are useful. Let me say something about English proficiency as well. We don't require TOEFL or IELTS or other standardized tests. We do want to be sure that you're comfortable enough with the English language that you won't struggle in that regard. But many students whose first or second or third language isn't English might not do as well on things like SAT or ACT, or they're still learning English. That doesn't worry us at all. In fact, many students from abroad learn English very quickly, and so that shouldn't be a worry. The proficiency test can be used to provide some of that comfort. And lately, there have been some options that are very inexpensive and much more portable, things like the Duolingo English test. So you can find on our website information about that thing. I also noticed one thing about applying to Yale. This is different at most of the Ivy League schools compared to most schools around the world. You don't apply just to study economics or electrical engineering, as you would in most places around the world. I think Yazan might have said that already, that you have the opportunity to explore different areas before you firmly decide what your major field may be. You may be pretty confident of that to begin with, but you have the opportunity to ask questions, to take classes, and then decide what your major will be. You don't have to apply to just one field. Back to you.
Thank you, Keith. And I'd also like to point out, just based on the questions in the chat, that this is for Yale College. So for undergraduate applications, it's a different process for postgraduate applications. And you could find more information about the different schools if you go on the Yale website, because I know different schools treat that differently. So this is mainly focused on undergraduate applications. And then there was a number of questions about, will Yale take into account the fact that I'm going through like economic hardships, or you're applying from Lebanon, and of course the situation is very, very challenging there. From my personal experience, I know that Yale take context really, really seriously. So everyone's context is taken into account separately. So they're not really comparing you with someone who might not be going through like the same situation. Context matters so much. So they will be able, the admissions officers will be able to see that you're going through a lot of hardship, that you're coming from a school that might not offer certain examinations, that you're coming from a certain background, whether that's financial or or you're going through a struggle. So I want to really, really stress that point. That shouldn't intimidate you at all. They will look at your application based completely on your context. It's not kind of like comparing people across the world and trying to just make absolute comparisons. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. And then I'm just sifting through the questions quickly, because I know we are running out of time and I want us to finish in the next 5 minutes. There is a question in terms of does Yale allow students to design their own major? Keith, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Well, there's not necessarily here's an option to design your own major, but the flexibility with the 2,000 different classes or so offered, the more than 80 major fields of studies that students can choose. And where the flexibility comes in is that even within major fields, the requirements may include options of routes you may take to probe areas within a field that are mostly interesting to you. And students are, the nature of a place like this, that a portion of your coursework relates to the degree, the field, your field of concentration. Some students even will major in 2 subjects, but you're allowed, in fact, we insist that you take advantage of the courses in other areas that are interesting to you. So your education won't be just governed by the field you choose. And I think Yale students leave here with a kind of agility and flexibility across disciplines that allow them to be leaders or thoughtful, even be hopeful in a complicated world. And there's evidence of Yalees who are out there doing important things with the environment and diplomacy and so on and so forth. And that has to do with, I think, the flexibility, even if it doesn't automatically lead itself to, I'm going to create my own major. You'll find that it'll be like going into an ice cream shop. You can put on sprinkles and chocolate and everything you want without leaving the shop.
Thank you so much for that, Keith. And that's super true based on my experiences and some of my friends, you might enter having a very good idea of the major you want to study in, but then you take, a super cool theater studies class and you're like, wow, that blew my mind away. And you start thinking in different ways, and you have the flexibility as part of this liberal arts education to switch your majors, and you don't have to declare that until a bit later on. So certainly not within your first year at Yale. So it's a time of exploration. It's a time for you to be able to see what's most interesting for you and what you want to explore in more depth before having to settle with the major. So when you're applying, the majors that you're putting there in that common application, it's just a bit speculative. So you're saying, oh, I think I might be interested in those subjects, but it's definitely not set in stone. And so many of my friends changed their majors a number of times, and there's always really good stories on that one. I think we'll just, the last question, Keith, would be the one in terms of how Yale looks at older applicants. So I don't know if that would be speaking a bit about the Eli Whitney program that's on offer.
Sure, and I'll be very quick in this and remind you that there are other ways to. I'll even put my email in the chat, or you can do it for me, Shady. But we look at students the way they are, even for the undergraduate program. So there are quite a few students who have taken gap years, one or two. Some are doing national service. Some are just have something else they'd like to do, or one of the questions, and you answered it wonderfully about context, that students have both challenges and opportunities that they take advantage of. So it's not at all unusual for students to apply that are chronologically a few years older, sometimes a little bit younger, but we're not looking for geniuses who are 10 years old. There's no rule, but anyway. And then Shady referred to, and you can look at it on our website, there's even a program for even more mature students of any age who have had an interruption in their studies, perhaps, or whatever. But it's called the Eli Whitney program for a small number of students. But you shouldn't worry that if you'd be entering a university at age 20 or 21 or 22, or that there would either be an automatic barrier to you, or that we would think about you differently. Every student's experience is their own experience. We can't take all of the students that we'd like to have at one time. But as I say, don't worry that there are even some secret barriers that haven't come up in this good conversation. So I'll stop talking and say thank you and shukran, and maybe I'll meet some of you along the way.
Thank you so much, Keith, for being with us and for being so honest and so open with answering the questions. I'd like to remind everyone that this is only the first part of the series. We'll be having the second section next week, same time, and that will be covering the writing application. We'll have with us Kathy Shafro, who's one of the writing tutors at Yale, will be speaking a bit more about how you should think about your applications when it comes to writing and drafting your various essays. And then we'll have the final section 2 weeks from today, again, same time. And that will basically be speaking a bit more about interviews and the common application more generally by one of our board members. But I just wanted to thank you all for coming and joining us on this first session, and for being with us and for being so enthusiastic and asking all those lovely questions. The conversation certainly doesn't end here. You have our email addresses. You could follow us on social media as well, the Yale Arab Student Association and the Yale Arab Alumni Association. If you have any further questions, you could also come to our next events and ask them there. We'll have a segment there for Q&A. I'd also really like to thank our current undergraduates, Amr and Faisal and Yazan and Tanya, for being with us and for being so open with sharing your experiences and just being there for prospective students. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on parts 2 and 3 of the series. Please feel free to share this information with some of your friends, some of your family members, anyone who you think might be interested in applying to Yale. We're trying to attract as many students as possible to such an incredible institution that gave me personally so much. And the one of the only ways I could do to try and pay this forward. So yeah, thank you everyone so much. Have a lovely afternoon or a lovely evening wherever you are. And we will see you in coming weeks. مع ألف سلامة. مع السلامة. Thanks again, Keith. Thank you. مع السلامة.